trusting yourself through the curve. Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Horsepower. I'm your host, Shell, road name Pass Out, and we've been talking about pivoting, about what happens when life doesn't follow the route you planned. And I want to take that motorcycle metaphor a little further because there's something else riding has taught me about pivoting. You have to trust yourself. And honestly, that can be really hard, especially for women, especially when we've spent a lifetime being told to consider everybody else's needs alongside or before our own. Think about how many times you've heard, "Are you sure? Is that practical? Is that really a good idea? At your age? Why would you start over now? Wouldn't it be easier to just stay where you are?" And sometimes these questions come from people who genuinely love us. Sometimes they're genuinely trying to protect us, but sometimes they're simply reflecting the fears that we already have inside our own heads. When I first started riding, I remember how much I had to think about everything. Where are my hands? Where are my feet? How much pressure am I putting on the brake? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? What's that car doing? What's happening behind me? What's happening in front of me? And then there's the voice in your head saying, "Don't fuck this up." Because apparently riding a motorcycle wasn't challenging enough. I also needed an internal commentator, but eventually something changes. You stop thinking about every individual movement. You start feeling the motorcycle. You start to trust your instincts. That muscle memory kicks in. You see the curve, you look through it, and you lean and you go. That's confidence, not the absence of fear, but rather the ability to function while you're afraid. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts of getting older. We have evidence. We've been through things. We've survived shit that we were absolutely certain would break us. We got receipts. We've lost jobs. We've lost people. We've had relationships end. We've made terrible decisions and we've made some excellent decisions. Maybe we've raised children. We've changed careers. We've started over. We've embarrassed ourselves. We've recovered. We've figured things out. And every one of those experiences becomes another mile underneath your tires. That's experience. That's wisdom. And yet somehow when we're facing something new, we forget all of it. We suddenly become the 20-year-old version of ourselves who's terrified that we're not qualified to be here. So here's something I want you to remember when you're facing your next pivot. You don't need to know that you're going to succeed. You just need to believe that you can handle whatever happens next. Those are two very different things. I can't promise myself that every career decision I'm going to make will work out. I can't promise that every relationship will work. I can't promise that every business idea will succeed. I can't promise that every motorcycle trip will go according to plan. But I can say, you know what? Shit goes wrong, I'll deal with it. And that's a completely different kind of confidence. And I think that's the kind of confidence we develop in midlife. There's another thing motorcycles have taught me. Don't stare at the thing you're afraid of. When you're going through a curve, you don't want to fixate on the guardrail. You look where you want to go, not where you're afraid you're going to end up. Because the motorcycle tends to follow your eyes, and life can work that way too. If all you can see is, what if I fail? What if I can't find another job? What if I'm alone? What if I'm too old? What if I made the wrong choice? What if this doesn't work? Then that's where all of your energy goes. Instead, sometimes you have to lift your eyes, look through the curve, look beyond the immediate obstacle and challenge and ask, where do I want to go from here? Not how the hell did I get here? Not why is this happening to me? Not why couldn't the things have stayed the same like they used to be? Those questions have their place for sure. But eventually you have to ask, okay, what now? What's next? And what's next doesn't have to be huge. That's another thing I think we put too much pressure on ourselves about. Your pivot doesn't have to be a dramatic reinvention. Maybe your pivot is something small. Maybe it's taking a class. Maybe it's updating your resume. Maybe it's finally applying for the job you don't think you'll get. Maybe it's starting a podcast. Maybe it's buying the motorcycle. Maybe it's taking that solo trip. Maybe it's saying no. Maybe it's saying yes. Maybe it's walking away from something that has been draining you for years. Maybe it's simply admitting this ain't working anymore. That's a pivot too. Here's the really uncomfortable part. Sometimes you have to disappoint people. That is hard. That is hard, especially for us as women. We have often been conditioned to be agreeable, to be helpful, to keep the peace, to make everybody comfortable. That's our job. That is the expectation culturally. But there are moments in life when the road you need to take isn't the road somebody else wants you to take. And you have to be willing to say, I understand that you don't agree, but this is my life. That's not necessarily selfish. That's ownership. I think about a motorcycle group ride, right? Everybody starts at the same place. Everybody has the same destination, but maybe somebody needs fuel and someone else needs a bathroom break and somebody's bike is having a problem. Maybe someone is uncomfortable with the pace and someone wants to stop and take a picture and someone sees something interesting and says, wait, we have to go check that out. And the ride changes. And that's okay. The group doesn't have to abandon the destination just because the route changes. And I think there's a lesson there for relationships, friendships, families, and even careers. The people who love you don't necessarily have to understand every turn you take. But the right people will respect that you are riding your own ride. And maybe that's one of the biggest lessons of midlife. We are allowed to ride our own ride. Not our husbands, not our mothers, not our bosses, not our children, ours. We get to decide where we're going. We get to decide when we need to stop. We get to decide when we're ready to move again, and we get to change our minds. I used to think changing your mind meant you weren't committed. Now I think sometimes changing your mind means you finally started listening to yourself. There is a difference. So if you're somewhere in the middle of a major life pivot right now, I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. First, what am I trying to hold on to simply because it's familiar? Not because it's good, not because it's right, just because it's familiar. Second, what am I afraid will happen if I change direction? Name the fear. Don't let it stay this giant undefined monster, right? Write it down, look at it, and then ask, is this a fact or is this simply a possibility? Because those aren't the same thing. Third question I want you to ask yourself, if I knew I could handle whatever happens next, where would I go? That's the question, not what would be safe, not what would make everyone else happy, but where would you go if you trusted yourself? That's a big question. It's huge. And you don't have to answer it today. Sometimes you just need to sit with it because the next chapter doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it starts quietly with a thought, a conversation, a job application, a motorcycle parked in your garage, a ticket booked, a boundary established, a decision to finally choose yourself. And that's where we're going to finish today. Because if you've been listening and thinking, okay, Shell, this all sounds great, but I'm terrified. Good. Be scared. I'm scared too. I don't think we're ever completely done being afraid. I think we just get better at riding with the fear. You don't have to know the whole route. I want to leave you with one final thought. When you get on a motorcycle, you don't need to see the entire road. You can't. The road typically disappears around a curve. The horizon is always farther away than we can see. You only need enough information to make the next decision. That's it. The next turn, the next mile, the next fuel stop, the next town. And maybe midlife works the same way. Maybe we're not supposed to have the entire rest of our lives figured out. Maybe that's just freaking impossible. And maybe that's not even the point. We spend so much of our younger years trying to build certainty, the right career, the right house, the right relationship, the right retirement plan. And then somewhere along the way, life reminds us there is no such thing as a guaranteed route. You can plan. You should plan for sure. But you also have to be willing to adjust, to pivot. If you're 40, 50, 60, 70, and you're thinking, is it too late? I want you to hear me very clearly. No. It is not too late. You may not have the same amount of time that you had at 20. But you have something you didn't have at 20. You know yourself. You know what matters. And you know what doesn't. You've learned what you're willing to tolerate. And you've learned what you're not willing to tolerate. You've learned the difference between being busy and being fulfilled. You've learned that some people are temporary, some relationships are lessons, some jobs are stepping stones, and some roads simply aren't your path anymore. And that's okay. You can turn around. You can take the exit. You can pull over. You can stop and figure shit out. You can say, I don't know. You can say, you know what? I changed my mind. You can say, this is not working for me. And you can say, I want something different. You can even say, I have no freaking clue what I'm doing, but I'm going to try. And that might be the bravest sentence of all, because here's the thing about a motorcycle. If you sit in your garage forever looking at the map, you're never going to experience the ride. At some point, you got to put on your helmet and start the engine. Pull those feet up and go. Yeah, you might get rained on. You might miss a turn. You might get lost. You might discover that the restaurant you plan to visit is closed. You might have to stop and ask for directions. You might wind up somewhere you never expected to be. And you know what? You might have the best day of your life. And that's what I want for us in midlife. Not a perfect life. Not a predictable life. A life that still feels like ours. A life where we're willing to take the road we've never taken before. A life where we're not constantly asking permission to become someone new. So if you're listening today and you're standing at your own personal intersection, career, relationship, family, health, adventure, identity, whatever it is, take a breath. Look around. You don't have to know exactly where the road leads. You just need to decide which direction you want to explore. And if you take the wrong road, well, you can always recalculate. That's the beauty of it. Maybe that's what motorcycles have really taught me. It's not about going fast. And it's not even really about the destination. It's about being present enough to notice the road and strong enough to handle the unexpected. Smart enough to know when it's time to stop and brave enough to take the curve. Confident enough to trust that you'll figure out what's around the next bend. So here's your challenge for this week. I want you to identify one place in your life where you've been telling yourself, I can't change this. And instead, try saying, maybe I can take a different route. That's all. You don't have to blow up your life. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow. You don't have to sell your house and buy a motorcycle. Although I'm certainly not going to be the one to tell you not to buy the motorcycle. But I digress. Give yourself permission to consider another road, because sometimes the pivot isn't the end of the journey. Sometimes it's where the adventure actually begins. Thank you for spending part of your day with me here on Hot Flashes and Horsepower. If this episode resonated with you, send it to a woman who's standing at a crossroads right now. Maybe she needs to hear that she's not behind. Maybe she needs to hear that she's not broken. Maybe she just needs something to remind her she's still got miles left in her. And so do you. Until next time, keep your eyes up, trust the curve, lean into that shit. And whatever you do, don't forget to enjoy the ride. I'm Shell, aka Pass Out, and this is Hot Flashes and Horsepower. I will see you down the road.